Welcome to another session of Meeting Your New Neighbors. This is our third session. Normally, as some of you will remember who've been here a while, normally we would have this whole room full of all of the people here at Westminster, and we would be having piano music and refreshments. And then we'd go around the tables and interview people, and later people would come and follow up on that. But what we've discovered, of course, with the pandemic is we can't do that. So we adopted this method knowing it has some shortcomings, but it is a way for you to hear a little bit. We have a most interesting group for you this time. This is the third film, as I've said, and eventually we'll be having another one in the first quarter of next year with new people that move in. I'm going to ask all of our new residents to really speak up, because the first film, a lot of people couldn't understand what some of the conversation. The second one, we said, please speak loudly, and that was a success. So we're going to try to do that now as well. Vince Bove is a good friend of mine. I'm from Vermont, he's from New York. I was born in New York. And so we're down here in Texas now, and he's an IBM executive, a former, and I'm a minister and a professor of philosophy. So we're going to go around and help you meet these people and listen to their background.
We're going to have a greet and meet.
A greet and meet, that's right.
That's what we're going to do. Greet and meet.
All right, we have Melissa Winans here. She's originally from Colorado Springs, Colorado. She's had such an interesting background, and when I was reading some information about her, she has interesting different degrees, and one of her degrees is a BA in music, and then she got a PhD in geology. And she's also an iTech specialist. So I was interested in anyone that has a BA in music and then goes on to geology.
Well, there's a perfectly good reason for that.
Well, I'm going to ask you about that. And then on top of that, she studied and taught vertebrate paleontology, studied that at University of Texas here, and then went on to teach it, and became an iTech specialist in paleontology. So she's the most interesting person. She's visited all over the world, including Iran, which we think she was there just as the Shah was ready to be deposed. So tell us about some of these experiences. They're wonderful.
Well, where would you like me to start?
Anywhere you want to.
Okay, the BA in music was because at the time I thought I wanted to teach K through 12 school, and in Colorado you have to have a degree in some real subject, and to them education is not real. So I figured, what the heck, I enjoy music, so I got my BA in music. And I went out to Los Angeles and spent 2 years teaching in the public schools there, only to be caught by Proposition 13, a proposition which the voters passed one year that set a cap on property taxes. And it had a very bad effect on a lot of public things, including the schools, because it meant that they no longer had the funding they needed to run, so they had to make cutbacks, starting with the most recently hired teachers. And so after a bit of wandering, I ended up working for the LA County Natural History Museum there in Los Angeles, and eventually decided that I wanted to take a degree in the subject. So I came to UT because UT has a very good program in vertebrate paleontology as part of its geology department.
I find that fascinating that it was part of the geology department.
That's right.
Yeah,
Well,
paleontology.
they have to put it somewhere.
You're right.
And typically, there aren't enough professors to make an entire department.
Right.
And also, in order to understand the fossils in the rocks, you have to also understand the rocks and how stratification of rocks works. So there's a lot in geology that you have to understand.
Right.
So
right.
typically, that's the way it's done. It's part of a geology department somewhere.
So then you went on to teach here as well.
I did not teach, no.
Oh, you did not
I
teach,
thought
okay.
I wanted to teach, but in the process of getting my PhD, I came to the conclusion that I was much happier doing the technical stuff.
So that's
and
where
not,
the IT came
not
in.
getting into school. And so I served as the collection manager for the vertebrate paleontology lab at UT for, let me see, 12 years, I believe it was, and then got hired away by the Texas Memorial Museum down on the UT campus, which also has a connection to paleontology. If you've never been there, then when they open up again after the pandemic, you should go and have a look, because they have some
Yes.
wonderful displays. And there, what they mainly wanted me for was my computer skills,
I see.
not my paleontology skills, because they needed someone to manage their computer systems. And I knew I'd come to the right place when everyone I was introduced to said, "Oh, I've got this problem that I've been living with forever, and could you please fix it for me?" So I did.
There are a few people like that here in Westminster
Yep.
as well.
I know how that goes.
Oh, wow. Now, did you ski in Colorado Springs?
No, I did not.
You did not.
I have much too active an imagination about what could happen if you take a fall to be willing to try skiing. I did hike a lot, though.
Yeah, I did break my leg twice, but I've enjoyed it so much, and
Which?
not the
Breaking
breaking
the
of the
leg?
leg.
Oh, good.
This one here, but it all healed back,
Yeah.
and I found that skiing is good for your prayer life.
Uh-huh.
You look down the mountain and you say, "Oh my God, I
Yes.
wonder if I'll make that or not."
I see your point.
Yeah, okay. All
I'm
right.
afraid I don't have quite enough faith in the power of prayer
Right.
to be able to take the same point of view that you have.
Well, it
Sorry.
becomes natural when you look down the mountain.
I'm sure it does.
What about Iran? You spent 2 summers there?
That's right. We were doing a paleontological dig over there in Iran, up in the northwest part of the country, where we knew there were a lot of fossils of a certain age that needed some research. So we spent 2 summers camped out up there doing excavations and determining just what the fossils were in the area.
Mhm.
A lot of kinds of antelope, more than anything else.
Mhm.
Few carnivores that were eating the antelope probably, and other things as
Did the
well.
Khomeini regime destroy some of those places, or?
Not as far as I know.
Oh, good, because I know some of them were working,
Yeah.
some of the really conservatives
Mhm.
were reacting against that, but.
Fortunately, they apparently didn't regard us as being important enough, being Americans, to be worth bothering
I
with.
see.
So we did okay.
All right. Well, and you've been here how long now?
About a month and a half.
Month and a half. Well, we're glad you're here.
Thank you.
And we're gonna have some interesting conversations with you over the years.
I'm sure.
We're gonna move ahead now.
Okay.
To Beverly Larkin. And Beverly, be sure to speak up so they can hear you. She is a social worker, a clinical social worker, and she has a specialty in family counseling, family therapy, which my sister does. And she'll, here in Austin as well. So she'll be moving in here when the new building is done.
Wonderful.
So you two will have to get together. We have several good therapists here among our people. Now, Beverly is from Vancouver, British Columbia, which is a part of Canada we often don't hear or see a lot, but it's a beautiful, beautiful section of the country. And your degree in social work is from the University of British Columbia, as I remember. But in addition to that, you received certification in the field, attended the Royal Conservatory in Toronto. In the field, was it music?
Yeah, piano.
Piano.
Solo performer.
Well, we will use your skills here, I'm sure. So you had that background as well, in another part of Canada. And so, tell us about your work here. What you can tell us.
Yes. Well, I have a passion for people
A passion for people.
and for nature
Uh-huh.
and art and music, but especially people.
Okay.
And so I've had the privilege to work with people who come and want help with their relationships, with their marriages, with their families, so that they can prevent problems from happening. And it's been sheer joy. And I'm still working.
Yeah, it's difficult work in one way. I also did that as a pastor, and I was also teaching in a university as well. But as a pastor, we would have a lot of people come to us with those kinds of issues and stress points. So I know how valuable your work is, but it's very tiring to enter into people's lives that way and then to leave it in the office when you leave.
I think we have good training
Yes.
and preparation for that.
Right. And so, but most of your work has been here in Austin, right?
Yes, it has been.
Okay,
After graduate school, it's been here.
yeah. And you go back often to British Columbia or
Every summer,
every summer?
except this summer.
Yeah, I'm the same boat. I go to Vermont every year,
Yes.
but I can't this year because
Yes.
of the pandemic.
And we're very deprived, aren't we?
We are.
Yes.
Yes.
But it makes us appreciate all the more. We
It
have a
just-
cottage in
Go ahead.
southeastern British Columbia
Yeah,
on the western side of the Canadian Rockies.
yes.
And there's a 100-mile-long glacier-fed lake, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Right.
And I'm fortunate to have grown up part of my life there. My children spent summers there, and now my grandchildren are the 5th generation to swim in that lake.
How about it? Did you ski as well?
I skied,
See, I
And I-
guess this is the skier,
and I
right?
swam,
Yeah, good for you.
and figure skated,
And figure skate?
yes.
Okay. Now, are your children here or up in British Columbia?
Well, 4 of them went to California schools.
Uh-huh.
I think because the whole western edge of the country is opened up in terms of communication, and because of our summers in British Columbia,
Right.
or they could have gone because they could play tennis and surf
Yeah, that's good
in
too.
California.
Right.
So, and then the 3 boys came back from California, and my daughter, who went to Stanford and loved it, stayed. But we're very close, and she talks about coming back
Okay.
in her time.
Very good.
Yes.
Now, when did you move into Westminster?
October 26th.
October
And
26th.
I think there's somebody else here who moved in on October 26th.
Right, so you're one of the newest groups here, right? All right. Well, it's wonderful to have you here, and we need social workers in this time particularly.
Well, I think we have wonderful people here.
We do. Austin has a great, we have another person here who was a social worker, Camille, I'll have to introduce you. She's a wonderful person. So,
Well, I think everybody I've met here are wonderful people.
well, that's a great recommendation. Good to, glad to have you here.
Thank you.
And we'll be meeting you in the hallways or somewhere as we
Right.
go along.
Thank you.
Okay.
Steve and Elaine Byers. I've known Steve and Elaine through church, through other friends, and I'm familiar with their background. But what had surprised me is with their combination of church, I learned something that Steve is active in politics. What is it, chairman?
I was precinct chairman.
Precinct chairman
Yeah.
in the Republican Party.
Right.
Tell us something about that, Steve.
Well, I was chairman in precinct 47, which is up by, we lived in Mesa and Far West, and it's around there. It might be the smallest precinct in town. It's 800 plus voters, as opposed to this precinct, which is 73, and I believe there's about 3,500 of them here. And Vince commented that he thought, well, that must be a rough place for a Republican to be a precinct chairman. Well, it wasn't that bad. It turned out that I think slightly less than half of the people, half of the voters, were Republican. And I'd go out and canvass and walk from house to house and talk to them. And if I remember right, I can't hold me to these numbers exactly, but it seemed like I would hit about 90 houses, which accounted for something like 140 people. So out of 800, you figure 800 registered voters in the precinct, about half of them vote. And the other half are either dead or moved or didn't vote. So 140 represents probably half, if not half the people in the precinct, half of the voting Republicans. And I'm a computer nut too, and I make out walking sheets by block, and from public records. Everything, it's all available on public records. And I'd go from house to house and talk to all these people. And that's the way I got to know people. It was really a lot of fun. It wasn't rough at all.
You enjoyed it?
I enjoyed it, yeah. I thought about it here, but numbers are different here.
So it isn't a rough and tough that I
No.
identified with.
I think here it might be. Because I ran some numbers on that, and you can't hold me to all this, but there's 3,200 voters or so, and I think of the Republican voters, there's something like 100, and 40 of those are right here at right here. So the numbers kind of talked me out of trying to be the precinct chairman here. I don't think I will.
Tell them that you went to the meetings, the Austin precinct meetings.
Well, they say, what does the precinct chairman do? Well, not a whole lot. I looked at my responsibilities as to get out the vote. And I have despaired long ago of changing anybody's mind about politics, but you can try to get them to go to vote.
Just let them go and vote.
And that's what I tried to do. And besides that, all of the precinct chairmen are were members of what they call the county party executive committee, and they have a meeting once a month, and I would go sit in on those. Between those two activities, and I think we went to a couple of state conventions, but between those two activities, that was just about what I did.
Now Elaine is active in St. Teresa's Church,
Yeah.
and she serves on the St. Vincent de Paul Society. You're on the Eucharistic minister?
No,
Not a Eucharistic
no,
minister.
no.
But you do serve on the Altar Society.
Yeah. mhm.
Very good.
I used to do their,
Tell us about the St. Vincent de Paul. I'm familiar with St. Vincent de Paul. Tell us about it in your own words. You must get a lot of satisfaction working with
Yeah.
the people.
well, what we do is, we are with St. Vincent de Paul at St. Teresa. Each church has their own society. And what we do is we help the people in need monetarily and with information on where to get other help. And so we get referrals, and since St. Teresa is not in the poorest area of town, we help St. Louis out. So we get most of our referrals from St. Louis. And we get a case, and then we go visit them, and we find out their need, and we know before we go how much money is for that week that we can help them with. And we decide with them what's the best way to do it. And then we help them with, I mean, I have a book that big with different sheets of what to help them with, you know,
Yeah.
legal aid or whatever, you know.
As I understand it, they help them with the paying their rent,
Yeah.
car payments, getting them over a hump just so they can get back to work.
And help them get out of, help them physically to get out of, payday type
Yes.
things, you know, that they're paying awful amount of interest.
Yes.
And we just do all kinds of things like that.
It's really great.
So, and right now, we don't go see them. Some people do, but I don't. I talk to them over the phone,
Yes.
and we meet our meetings on Zoom,
Very
like
good.
tonight. So,
Very good. Steve, you were in the engineering field. Were you in the manufacturing part of the engineering, or?
I was entirely in manufacturing. I never did work in product design or product engineering. I did a lot of different jobs. Seemed like I only lasted about 3 years on any job till they got tired of me and moved me someplace else.
You were so good that you could,
Yes.
you did all you could possibly do
So
in
good or
3
so
years.
bad.
Only took you 3 years to solve the problem.
Maybe it was so bad. I still don't know. But it was an interesting job. I worked, started out as a trainee in a manufacturing department, and was the idea I was going to work in manufacturing management, which I kind of did, but as an engineer. Then I worked in data processing, and I worked in the factory. I spent quite a time working in the factory, and as a foreman and superintendent. And I was a manager of an engineering group that did facilities engineering, once again in facilities. And I don't know, what else did I do, Elaine?
plant engineer.
I was plant engineer at one place, yeah. Worked in the parts department for a while.
How did you get from Illinois down to Texas?
We've got a daughter here.
Oh,
And
that's
That's how it
nice.
works.
Actually, what Beverly mentioned, Vancouver, we lived in Bremerton, which is real close. But from, where was I? I was on.
You were in the Navy.
Why we're here, yeah, I was in the Navy then. But we moved down here because we have a daughter here.
Well, that's
And,
nice.
And brother.
We're getting cold. What I started off on, the story I started off on is we have another daughter who lived in Seattle. And we were gonna move to Seattle. We'd actually gone up there and made an offer on a house. One day the son-in-law calls up and says, "How would you like to move to Austin?" He had a job offer in Austin.
Yeah.
Good, it's warmer there. So we
Yeah.
we all moved to Austin, and that's why we're here.
Very nice.
Okay. All right, now.
I'd like to introduce Bill Gersich. He's had an interesting career. His career started fresh out of college. He and his associates started an advertising firm that went on to be one of the largest independent advertising agencies in the country.
Wow.
And Bill and I have talked about that. And then after that, Bill went into the housing business, developing housing developments and building houses, and then into the real estate business. But he also has an interest in ranching and hunting. But I was very pleased to hear him tell me about, he was more interested in providing for the wildlife in serving them. So tell us about your career. Start with, you're fresh out of college, starting an advertising agency. Is that an easy task?
Well, fresh out of college, broke and no money. Myself and 4 other individuals started an advertising agency, and for the first 2 or 3 years, we barely scraped ends, and we scraped together enough to eat, but then gradually picked up a lot of local accounts, and I specialized in advertising, real estate,
and I went to work for selling. We're trying to help the home builders in this town sell their houses, and the developers sell their communities, and in that way I began to learn about that side of the business as well. But I was involved in the advertising agency for 21 years. It was a great company, still is today. It
It went on
employs-
to be one of the largest private advertising agencies in the country.
GSD&M had 647 employees when we sold the company. And I think they peaked at about 1,000 employees, and they own about 200,000 square foot office building down at Lamar and 6th Street.
Bill,
And
can you speak up just a little? Over here, it's hard to hear.
they own today a 200,000 square foot facility at 6th Street at Lamar and 6th, between 6th and 5th. And that's been their home office, but prior to that, we had office over on Loop 360, and I had built a wonderful facility for the company over there. It's called Cielo Center. It was a 306,000 square foot office building. It was the first premier building built outside the downtown area, and it had marble floor, book matched marble floors, and
That's right next to Whole Foods, isn't it?
no, it's actually next to Lost Creek. That's where Cielo Center is. But that was a 300,000 square foot building, and then we built 4 other buildings along Loop 360. And I built 4 major residential communities, southwest, southeast, west, Austin, all over 1,000 houses apiece, and they range from 1,000 to 2,000 houses apiece. And owned a bed and breakfast hotel and restored the good old Wooten Mansion into a boutique hotel, and owned that for 12 or 15 years, and had a grand time with that. Thought I'd never get in the bar and restaurant business, and swore I'd never go back again into it, but it was one of those things that just sort of came to be, and I fell in love with this old historical structure and just turned it into a 48-room bed and breakfast hotel. And then we started a second hotel, and then sold the whole group of hotels to a party that now has 3 hotels here in town. But I've been a consummate entrepreneur. I love to work. I'm still working today. I'm active in the stock market. I'm active in the real estate community today. I'm building 9 warehouses this year, developing 700 lots this year, and involved in multiple large land transactions. The largest of which is a 230-acre industrial tract transaction that's involved over by the new airport, or by the Austin airport. And but I love life.
Tell us about your wildlife involvement too.
Well,
You start off as a hunter.
Yeah.
You had a lodge in South Texas.
I owned a ranch in South Texas with my brother, and we owned it for 15 years down there. And it was a small ranch. Our portion of it was 3,000 acres. And but that's small for that area of the country. You could have 25,000 acre ranches down there. But we raised a really beautiful herd of wildlife, white-tailed deer, and raised them over a 15-year period of time, and were able to increase the horn mass on the animals significantly. And we had some Boone and Crockett and some Pope and Young animals that were taken on the ranch, And those are national scoring ranks of animals that are harvested. But we managed the herd. We had 296 bucks and about 216 does a year on the ranch. And then we had a whole configuration of coyotes and bobcats and desert cougars that were in and out of the place. A desert cougar would roam 25 square miles or 25 circular miles at a time, and they would make the rounds about every 6 months. And we had 3 or 4 stationary animals that were on our property most of the time. And I built a creek and dam system on the ranch and backed up about 300 acres of water, and raised Kentucky and Florida hybrid bass, and caught some 14, 15-pound bass, which is no shoddy little piece of bass. But I really enjoyed the management side of the wildlife more than anything, and watching the animals and almost watching them grow up and die and go through their life cycles and everything else, and watch the whole ambiance of how they all live together. The predators and the vermin and everything else all in one grouping. But I love those kind of activities as well, and currently I'm interested in cosmology. I've been studying the cosmos for about 3 years, and some of the black holes and some of the subjects of this gentleman that is going to be introduced next, that he's a professor in, and enjoy that line of thinking and that line of work. But I enjoy people, I enjoy places, I enjoy travel. I've traveled all my life, and
You've had a good career.
and enjoy exciting ideas. So
Thank you very much.
don't mess with Texas.
Thank you.
And Mary Cormendi. And they are an interesting couple. John went to Caltech and got his PhD and went on to a career as a professor of astronomy in Hawaii, living in Honolulu. And so he's been associated with a number of different groups in the whole field of astronomy. So he's a rather interesting person to talk to about that, and I guess Hawaii, from what he was telling me, has one of the best telescopes and the best vantage point to study in that field. And his wife, Mary, was born in one of the most beautiful parts of the world, which was Yorkshire. Brick House. And if you've not been to the Yorkshire Dales, it's one of the greatest experiences that you can have. They're absolutely stunning. She went all the way through high school there and then came over here to Hawaii next?
I went through high school, I got married, I have 2 children, and then moved to British Columbia, Canada.
That's right, British Columbia.
And then I moved from there with my husband to Hawaii for 10 years before we came here.
All right. Well, it's a wonderful thing. She has been a secretary. She's been a travel consultant, and she's interested in ice hockey, I discovered.
I'm interested in what?
Ice hockey?
Yes.
I am too.
No.
Yeah. What's your favorite?
Well, if you live in British Columbia, especially the central Brit, you have to be interested in it all.
If you
That's
live
it.
in Canada, you have to be
Right.
interested in it. What's your favorite team?
What was my favorite team? Vancouver Canucks.
Oh, the Canucks.
Yes.
Well, I had the Detroit Red Wings. But, well, that's really, and there's another person here in Westminster who's in charge of the health area. Her name is Robin, and Robin is a fanatic about ice
Oh.
hockey. So you'll have to talk to her about that. And her son, I didn't even know they had ice hockey in Texas, but they do. So that's good. All right, well, tell us a little bit, John, about your work and your career.
Sure. I was born in Austria
Where are
in
you?
1948.
Where?
Graz. It's in southeastern, south of Vienna.
So Sie können Deutsch sprechen?
Yeah, I can Dutch sprechen.
Ah.
Not as good, not as well as I'd like.
Österreicher Deutsch.
Österreicher. And I grew up in eastern Canada near Niagara Falls. Went to the University of Toronto as an undergraduate. Caltech as a graduate student. After that, had postdocs at Kitt Peak in Tucson, Arizona, and Berkeley. And then spent 10 years at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory, which is the Canadian National Optical Observatory in Victoria, British Columbia. It's where Mary and I met.
Mm-hmm.
She was the observatory travel agent, among other things. And I was very interested in travel, and
Let me
rather
just
rapidly we became interested
Let
in
me
each
just
other.
tell you a funny story. I got a call from the secretary where he worked saying that she had a new astronomer and he wanted to come in and book a travel at 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon,
Mm-hmm.
which made me not like him at all.
Really and truly.
5 o'clock is the middle of my workday.
Right.
And I like Saturdays and Sundays because you can get a lot of work done on Saturdays and Sundays. And so this emphasis that 5 o'clock on a Friday is special had rather different meaning for me than it did for Mary. And
Exactly.
it took a little while for us to figure that all out.
There's also a tremendous advantage in marrying your travel agent.
Yeah, you would
Yeah.
better believe it.
You are set for life.
And so I then worked for 10 years in Victoria. 10 years we lived in, the 10 years of the 1990s we lived in Honolulu. That was great because Hawaii is as nice a place to visit as everybody thinks it is.
Yeah,
It's not quite so nice a place to live because it's expensive,
it is.
but you certainly benefit from all of the things that you know you benefit from. And I benefited from the fact that we had institutional access to Mauna Kea observatories, which is the best observing site on the surface of the Earth.
Uh-huh.
And so I was able to do work there on, for example, supermassive black holes, which would have been difficult anywhere else, and which job eventually got taken over by the Hubble Space Telescope. But when I did my work in the 1980s, there was no Hubble Space Telescope. So in 2000, we then moved here, and we've been here ever since, living near Dripping Springs, and now try to spend about half our time at our house, which we still have, out near Dripping Springs, and about half our time here. We've been here now for 2 weeks, so as of today, so we're very much newcomers and enjoying our time here.
Well, when I was in seminary, we had, this is Evanston, Illinois, a great program at Northwestern in astronomy and a terrific telescope. And the astronomers like you would come over and have lunch with us who were budding theologians. And we had the most interesting discussions about what's out there. And we really learned a lot from, and now astronomy and theology have had great discussions going.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
Of course, the boundary of what we can try to investigate
yeah.
is the place where what you folks are expert in abuts us, right?
Yeah,
So we're in a very difficult position in trying to say anything about the actual creation of the universe.
yes,
That's not really exactly a subject that science can tackle.
no,
It is central to the subjects that you're interested in.
yeah,
What we try to do is figure out what happened from the moment of creation onward.
yes,
That has made spectacular progress in the last
totally.
20 years or so. That particular part of astronomy, the study of cosmology, the study of the evolution of the universe, I'm only sort of indirectly involved in.
Yeah,
I work on galaxies, which are the constituents of the universe. Our Milky Way is one of those galaxies.
mhm.
And I work on supermassive black holes, which live in the centers of many of those galaxies, including ours, and affect their evolution. I've worked on looking for them for much of my career. I've worked on their effects on the evolution of stuff in the universe for much of my career, and it's been a very good subject to me because black holes have a mystique that everybody's really very interested in, and so
Totally.
it's a subject that's just a lot of fun. I've given 3 popular talks in this room. I hope that some people who live here will remember some of those. I look forward to perhaps having a few more in the future,
Well,
and to being here.
we look forward to that and having some lunches together, and eventually, when the dining room gets more active, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would like to have a discussion with both of you, really.
Thank you.
The other thing that's worth mentioning, if I could just have another 30 seconds.
Sure.
One of my big passions in Mary's Food, outside of work, are birds.
Oh, I meant to mention that.
And we try to go all over the world looking for bird species, photographing birds. Anybody who Googles my last name can find my website very easily. And we have a lot of bird pictures posted on my website under the link that's obviously not my work. So we really enjoy that.
You've seen half of the,
No, 1/3.
1/3
We've seen
of the
just-
species.
Just slightly more than 1/3 of all the world's bird species.
Wow.
And I'm sort of, modestly proud of that, in much the same way that I'm happy to have had a chance to do some astronomy that's worth doing.
Yeah, interesting field.
It's a great subject.
Thank you very much. How long have you been here now?
In this building, we've lived for 2 weeks today.
2 weeks?
In fact,
Welcome.
considering the time, 2 weeks to the nearest hour and a half.
It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
Vin-
And Barbara Carlson. They've had an interesting career, interesting family, and they've done a great deal of traveling. Jerry was with IBM. He worked at 2 of the major plants here in Austin and up in San Jose, California. And they both did some public service work, which was very interesting to me. And another thing is they're both from Iowa. Now, all of you know Iowa. Iowa is the home of the computer. What we call a computer today was invented in Iowa, right?
You can't, I can't confirm it, but I believe you.
If you say so.
The university, not the University of Iowa, is that right? John Vincent Atanasio invented the first digital computer.
I guess so.
And there was a congressional delegation actually confirmed it, because in later years, Remington Rand and IBM and a whole bunch of them tried to claim that they were the first ones, but he did it in 1939. So that's how he started in the electrical engineering business. And also, in addition to their very successful family life, careers, they both had a great deal of public service. So I'll let Barbara start. Tell me about your public service with the county commissioner.
Well, let's see. So if you are from here, you know Bruce Todd was the mayor of Austin for a number of years. But before that, he was a county commissioner, and where he resigned his commissioner position to run for mayor, Bill Elshire, the judge, had the opportunity to choose somebody to replace him and get that person to agree to run to keep the office. And so he chose me, so I didn't have to run to get the position in the beginning, but then I had to run for office a year later. So it was a rich experience, to say the least. I had been volunteer in the community for years. I helped start hospice here, the Hospice Foundation. And I had worked on the drug issues in the high school when our kids were in high school, and various other things. So it was a rich experience. I served Precinct 2, which is where this building is, and it was an experience to learn how to work politically so close to the people. And I think what really surprised Jerry is one night, it was a Saturday night, and I got a call at home because somebody's neighbor had a dog that was barking and they wanted me to do something about it. So it was a wide range of, everything from the roads and bridges to
Dog catcher.
to dog catchers. But it was a good experience. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Jerry, tell us about your IBM career, and then you can tell us about your public service work as well. Jerry served on the Austin School Board, which I think is a very rewarding position. Tell us about your IBM career first.
Okay. I have a little tightness in my throat, so I'll try to be as loud or clear as I can. Just to put a little into context, Barbara and I grew up on farms in Iowa, and we met going to high school, and we started dating when I was a senior and she was a junior, and so we dated until we were old enough to where we could put everything in the car and go to California, which is what we did in 1960. By then Barbara was already 19 and I was 20, so there wasn't a hell of a lot left to learn about what to do, because we didn't know there was things to do. But anyway, we went to Southern California, and to get back to your question, I took electrical engineering in California, in Southern California, got a BS and double E in '63, and went to work for IBM in San Jose in '63 as a junior engineer. And those were really good days for IBM. As the business of computing grew, so did IBM. And we spent several years in San Jose, and then I got transferred to New York. So that was an exposure to corporate and divisions that run IBM. Certainly new for me. And we had our second child there, first child in San Jose, second one there while we were there. And then back to San Jose after a couple of years to start moving up in different jobs in IBM. IBM at that point had the hard disk, so it was eventually replaced by semiconductors, but prior to that it was very much putting a coated surface magnetically over some large disks and putting that all together, and that was your backup storage for your computers. And did that in San Jose for several more years. So a lot of moving around as we spent time
I've
in
been
IBM.
moved.
But it was a successful 34 years. I retired in '97, having gone back and forth across the country, and in Austin twice, and in San Jose 3 times, and ended up retiring here and living here, and we loved Austin.
They started in Clarinda, Iowa. Clarinda, Iowa.
And that is where Glenn Miller was born. And
Glenn
his
Miller
house-
was born
His
in
house is
Clarinda. Of
still
course,
a
everyone knew
museum.
that.
Wow.
And they have a museum there for
They
Glenn.
do. His house is still there, and one of my dear friends manages it. They have tours and they have a music festival every year there to honor Glenn Miller, and a big band from Japan comes every year. And Japanese love Glenn Miller for
Yeah.
some reason.
That's
Anyways,
nice.
yeah, it's nice. One of the things, just to tell you more about us personally, when Jerry retired, we bought a small home in Jackson, Wyoming. And we have always loved the outdoors, like Bill was talking about over here, and nature. And so we spent all of our summers there and often spent our holidays there. And our grandchildren, we have 6 of them, pretty much grew up there. And we just sold that house and closed on it 2 weeks ago. So that's a big sort of sadness for us in a way, but somebody bought it that is going to love it as much as we did, I'm sure. But one of the things we did a lot of is we climbed mountains and hiked. And Jerry climbed all the Tetons, 7 of them, so he's climbed the major peaks in the Tetons. And I climbed the highest mountain in Wyoming, which is Gannett Peak, a 5-day experience. And so we're going to miss the wildlife of Wyoming. We used to have moose and elk, herds of elk, and foxes, and all sorts of wildlife wandering through our yard. So it was a great time. So
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
thank you.
Another IBM executive who did public service is standing right here, and IBM loaned him to run the Winter Olympics in Lake Placid, New York, where he got a lot of notoriety for that. So they've always been committed to public service as well.
And we were at that Olympics.
And you were at the Olympics.
And they were at the Olympics.
Okay.
They waved at me when they went by City Hall. They saw me in the window and they waved. That's
Okay,
quite a
well, Vince and I
coincidence.
are going to sign off, and we're grateful to all of you for sharing your really fascinating background and stories. And I know a lot of people who are going to watch this on our television station or channel will want to follow up with some of you, and there are probably connections
Make
yet
the
to be
connection.
made.
That's what I wanted to say. It's a real pleasure to welcome all of you here today. And you're going to enjoy it, and we're going to enjoy
Having,
interacting with you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.